everybody. Welcome to Book Banter. This is a really special Book Banter tonight because we're going to be giving live book recommendations from all the staff here at Blue Cypress Books. And at any point, if you have anyone you're looking for a last minute gift for, or even just a reader that you know or yourself, type it in the comments. Give us a little bit of info about that reader and we will give you book recs for anybody on your list. We can also tonight hold those books, so we're going to try and pick books that we actually have on our shelf. So if you really do need a last minute gift, you can come in tomorrow and pick these books up. We'll put your name on them. And without further ado, this is Jody. Hi, Jody.
Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm Jody. Raina and I work together here at Blue Cypress Books. We're excited to join you today. Day or evening, I never know what 5 o'clock counts as, especially when it gets dark at 4:30 in the saddest way. Good whatever time of day it is, but we're excited to talk about books and give you some of our favorite recommendations for your hardest to buy for folks.
Absolutely. So I was thinking that maybe to get us started until somebody comments in and gives us a question here, we could maybe like throw a couple categories at each other and see what we have for.
Oh, I have an actual list that I brought today of gifts I actually need to get for people.
Oh my gosh.
So I can give you my first one.
Yeah, please do. Go.
Okay. He's a baby. 2 months old or so. I already picked up 2 of the Little Naturalists. I did the Washington Carver and I did the John James Audubon Draws Payne's Birds. So I want a third board book for him. He, as of yet, does not have many interests, so it's a little difficult. So mostly I am putting my interest on him, which I'm perfectly happy to do. Books that are fun for the parents, as well as the baby, since the baby, cannot read his own books yet. So hit me with your recommendations, Raina.
All right. So since there was nobody in the way here, I just brought my whole laptop over to the board book section. Now, my son, when he was growing up, he loved these Richard Scarry like Cars and Trucks books. Mm-hmm. And what I love about both of these is that they will grow with you. Like you can get those bigger when they get older, the bigger picture book Richard Scarrys that have like more and more of these just labeled things, construction vehicles and everything, and those are great.
So boys seem to be big fans of the truck.
They really do. Hi, Rebecca. I can tell you something about Rebecca's son. He was super into construction vehicles, and he's like really engineering. Like he can take apart like your car, he can rebuild that. He's redone like his own lawnmowers and stuff. They will buy him a broken lawnmower and he will fix it. And he's 15, or he's about to be 15. My son turned 15. But yeah, he totally would love all of these things too. I mean, another thing you could do is like fun. These are great. If you guys have not seen these,
I'm obsessed with those. Yeah.
There's a Bigfoot one. There's a Sasquatch one. These are hilarious.
Do we still have the I Believe in You, the oversized one? It was on the top of that shelf.
Oh, yes. These are so.
I'm obsessed with that one. It's so cute.
And these can be fun for parents too because they're just a little different and a little quirky, and so that like makes it not the same book about cars you've read every day,
I also assume that kids are given a lot of books, and so I like to find books that are a little bit outside of maybe the mainstream, so that I'm not double gifting something they've already received.
Exactly. That's definitely something. If you don't know the kid really well, it's not like your child or maybe grandchild, and it's a little bit, down the line there. Those Richard Scarrys could be a little. Like they could be done. Somebody might think of Richard Scarry, but they're probably not going to think of Sasquatch. So you've got
definitely not
that for sure. So guys that you're watching, thank you for saying hi, and it's always fun to see where you're viewing from. So if you want to add that in the comments, if you don't have a reader in mind, you can just tell us where you're viewing from because that's fun. But if you have anyone that you are looking for a gift for or need a recommendation for, tell us a little bit about the reader in the comments there. And Rebecca says, especially the things that go book, and also my truck is stuck. I don't know if we have my truck is stuck.
Oh my gosh.
Does that?
That seems so far away.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's great. Like, yeah, to see where everybody's watching from. But I don't think we have a copy on the shelf. We can probably order it. It's a fun one though. My truck is stuck. Another good one for that age group for sure.
Well, thank you. I have to pick some books out before I leave today. So thank you.
All right, who else is on your list?
Oh, well, I left my physical list sitting on my desk at home before I came here, so I'm gonna have to just remember who else is on my list. A local cookbook for a friend of mine who's from Louisiana, moved to Texas. Maybe if we have local, she's a home ec teacher. She's a big baker.
Oh my
So if we
gosh.
have local baking, something local baking, or I can check upstairs for baking. But
Okay, she's a home ec teacher though.
Mhm.
What if The Secret Life, oh no, The Secret of Home Economics, The Secret History of Home Economics.
She would love, yeah, that's a
She would
great
love
one.
that.
That's a great one.
That's another one. I know we ordered it, but I think it sells so fast. Like we order 1 or 2 copies and we sell 1 or 2 copies a week. Like that keeps happening. So I'm not sure if we have that one at the moment.
Well, and I'm actually not going to see her anytime soon. I'm mailing them anyway, so that is definitely something I can do after Christmas.
Okay, I definitely recommend that one. That's a fun book for sure. Okay. 12-year-old that loves fantasy. What do you think?
Oh, Raina, that is your wheelhouse for sure. But
so 12
go-to.
is an interesting age in there too. There's like that sort of 12 to 14, 15, depending on the kid, because you have a content question, right? What are we, are we okay with people dying? Are we okay with love stories? Where are we right there? I can give you one that I feel like that might be a little old. I was gonna
say there's like upper middle grade, lower YA is like that's a really tough kind of. It can go either way on what you want to pick out for folks there.
It is an interesting category. So I have my Bridget Kimmerer books, which I'm gonna work in at some point during the hour because that's gonna happen. And something I do love about her books is that they're not particularly graphic no matter what. I wonder if she has read Rebecca, has she read The Wings of Fire? Because that's a great series if she has not. And there's like 12 books, so you could keep going.
14, I had to look 14.
It up. Yeah, see.
And the 15th comes out early next year.
So that's a good one. And it sells really well. It's really popular. I've only read the first one, but it was a great, I was in. I'm not a 12-year-old, so I didn't keep reading.
Actually, the Wings of Fire series comes very highly recommended from a group of students who wrote book reviews for us through a teacher who's a big Blue Cypress fan and patron. And what I took away, my favorite sort of commentary on the book was that most dragon books focus on people who are interacting with dragons, whereas Wings of Fire is from the perspective of the dragons, and it really explores the detrimental impact of humans on dragons. And I think that is such an interesting take. And a local 12-year-old pointed that out, and I thought that was a very insightful way to look at the Wings of Fire series.
It really does, and that does set the series apart from, like you said, from other things typically that you would read.
Other dragon-focused things, yeah.
Absolutely. So, should I plug Bridget Kimmerer now, even though it might be a little bit old? I'm gonna do it. Here we go. I'm gonna do it. Okay, so this is the new Bridget Kimmerer. It's Defy the Night, and technically, I think that people would say that this is more of a teen book. There is a love interest. Nothing happens. Spoiler alert. Nothing happens. There is definitely talk of a hanging that happened, but it doesn't happen in front of your face. It is mostly a kingdom very parallel to our own, but was written pre-COVID, so it's not COVID related. But there's a pandemic that's going on in this kingdom, And some people think that the royalty knows more than they say they do, basically. And so there's this uprising. And what happens? Nobody knows. But I loved it. And I love that in each chapter is told from a different point of view. So one is the lead female character, and the next one is the lead male character, lead female, lead male. So you kind of get both sides of the story as you go along. For sure. I'm here making
also, and I know that we have.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm reading the comments.
We did at least yesterday, but it's downstairs with you. I really love Robert Beatty and his stories, and so I think Willa of the Wood is exactly the right age and is very delightful. And I also really enjoy him personally. I think he's very nice, and it's one of my favorites when an author is also nice and seems to be a lovely person.
So it looks like we don't have Will of the Wood. We have the next one, Will in the Dark Hollow, but he has, he's
Serafina as well.
Right, he's the author of the Serafina books, and so both of those series are really good. I don't know if she's read, her 12-year-old has read those Serafina books or not. Making fruitcake. Okay, so I've still never really had a fruitcake I liked. So Rebecca, you'll have to bring in some fruitcake.
Convince us otherwise.
Right.
Oh, I have another one.
Okay, go for it.
My niece, who is 2.5 or so, I picked up the Rebecca, if you want to take that as a challenge, we would gladly taste test those fruitcakes.
Yeah, we will eat your fruitcakes.
So I've already got her a really beautiful. Anytime somebody I know is having a kid, I always pick up the small editions of the Beatrix Potter books. So usually like Peter Rabbit or Jemima Puddle Duck. So I have a handful of favorites. I like keep them. I have in the same way that some people have a costume closet at home, I have a gift book closet at home where I stash things away. So I always have a handful of those on deck for any announcement. I just hand over the book. She's already received that, but I got her a larger like picture book style Peter Rabbit, and there was an illustrated whole set of the Chronicles of Narnia, which my brother-in-law is a big fan of. Obviously, she can't read it yet, but it's sort of a family gift, so I picked that up. So I have those two things, and I want to get her probably a picture book. So I've given her a million board books in her short existence. So would love a picture book.
Well, and at 2.5, you're sort of starting that graduation where she can pay attention to a little bit longer.
And they do a lot of reading. Like they do a lot. She handles the books on her own, but they do a lot of read to me's too.
I'm gonna come over here. So we're looking for a picture book for a 2.5-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what? Ooh, Rainbow Fish. Do you know Rainbow Fish? It's a classic.
That is
again. That sort of depends on like how well do you know them. Would they have gotten Rainbow Fish? But I'll tell you this: like Rainbow Fish was off my radar until I became a bookseller, which is like some people grew up with this and they're like, oh yeah, I know it. You know, I've read it a billion times, and I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, that's lovely. If you want to set that one behind the counter for me,
I absolutely will.
And I'll come grab it in a minute. My favorite Rainbow Fish story comes recently where a friend of mine who has a daughter who's 4 is obsessed with Rainbow Fish and wanted a Rainbow Fish themed birthday party recently, but all of the invitations that were available were not specifically the right Rainbow Fish. And I'm just tickled and obsessed with the idea that she was like, nope, this is not the Rainbow Fish I know. This is an off-brand. This is a Shein Rainbow Fish, and I'm not a fan. And I like that very much.
An off-brand Rainbow Fish.
No, and she was not
bringing that.
She was not here for it. I love when small people have big opinions. I think it's very endearing.
Yes. And you're just like, I'm going to do my best to take you seriously right now. You're adorable. Okay. That's great. Okay, so I'm gonna actually ask you for a book rec of one of my favorite genres, which is like books in translation. And I'm not particularly picky because I feel like books in translation kind of give you that travel aspect where you're sort of immersed in that culture, even if it's just a book about whatever. Doesn't, it's not really about that culture. You end up learning things that you wouldn't normally because of the way it's written. Do you have any favorite books in translation?
I absolutely do, and I'm surprised we haven't made you read it yet because it's a shop favorite. You've heard about this extensively.
Hold
Have
on.
you read A Winter's Promise?
I have not read A Winter's Promise, but
Have you not?
I know.
We're going to
There's
talk about this later.
there's a couple of books that I do have to read, and it's this is for real on my list for 2022 because I make a personal reading challenge of about 10 books that either I haven't ever read or I've read a long time ago and have always wanted to reread. And this is actually on my 10 book list for 2022 because it is one of those like ones when I started working here at Blue Cypress, there's a few books and everybody's like, you have to read this, and this was one of them. So
Well,
I'm
going to tell you and everyone a little about it anyway because it deserves it.
Yes.
So A Winter's Promise is published through Europa Press, which is one of our favorite. It's a shop favorite as publishers go. They publish, they select books that are not written in English and translate them for English speaking audiences. So, and they're contemporary typically. So these are books that are recently published in lots of other countries all over the world. So this one is set in France, written in France, originally written in French. And it's technically YA, but I think it almost falls more in the new adult category where there's a little bit more depth of character. There's very intricate world building. It is not super fast paced. It's not slow paced necessarily. It's a medium paced book, and I find a lot of YA is pretty fast paced. What I think is most compelling about this book is that she has created a world that feels so distinct. It's fantasy, it's a take on dystopia, but in a way that doesn't feel overwrought or overdone. It feels completely new. It's incredibly atmospheric, like Victorian steampunk. And I think inspired by French culture, which is also something there's a lot of Western European culture, I think, represented in fantasy and big epic fantasy series, but not necessarily French. And so I appreciate the getting to know French culture a little bit more than I did before I read the series. So you absolutely have to read it. And the fourth book is out, so you won't even have to wait. It came out in October, so we all had to wait for the fourth book, but you will not.
Yeah, that's one of those things too. I will wait a lot of times for a series to come out, especially if it already has dates. Like sometimes, like if you're doing that Game of Thrones thing where you're waiting for that last book, that's never happening, but if this one's coming out 21, 22, 23, for example, or whatever, I'm like, okay, I can wait that one out. Because I just
it is nice. It is nice to have an end in sight. I
it's
respect
like
it.
watching.
I have no self-control. So I have read so many books with a single book out all the time.
It's fine. It's fine.
Just my MO.
Sometimes that's where that's where it's at. Let me see.
Yeah, I'm definitely a mood reader. So if it strikes me, I'm gonna read it.
I pulled a couple of my favorite books in translation, which these are both by Mario Bellatin, which if you have not Googled him, you need to do this. Like everyone just make a note and Google him afterwards because he is this crazy creative guy, and he had an accident when he was younger and he lost an arm. So he has all of these prosthetics that are just these crazy prosthetics. Like he has them molded and he'll get an idea in his head and he'll just order one, and he's got like this huge scythe and he has these like ones with like stars all over them. He has all kinds of these weird prosthetics, and that is just a very like physical example of what he does with everything. There's story after story about all these weird creative things, and these stories, he's a Mexican author, and both of these are kind of crazy pants, but also at the end you're like, oh, Like just keep going. If you're like, why did that happen? I don't understand what's happening. Just go, because they're short. You can do that. And you get to the end and you're like, oh, why do I love this guy? I care about this. How did that happen? You're like practically almost like you're like in tears, and you're like, I didn't even know what was going on for the first half, and that second half will just hit you. He's great at that. So Mario Bellatin.
Noted. That sounds super good.
All right, do you remember anybody else off your list?
I think the handful, there's a couple I'm thinking of, but there's some ones that would be up here. So
Well,
would be difficult for you to grab. But I need to scour the gardening nature section for a friend of the family who I've known for my whole life, who's a big gardener, but more poignantly, she and my mother have known each other forever, since high school. And my mom, they bonded a lot over gardening. And so losing my mom was tough for me. It was very tough for her. And so I think that we have a cactus book on the shelf. And my mom had this huge cactus garden, like covered like this huge, like an absurd amount of cactuses. And so I think I'm going to snag that cactus book and send it to her with a little note that it reminded me of her.
That would
so I've got that one.
That would be a cute gift.
And it's beautiful. It's like a coffee table style, like very pretty book.
So we were talking earlier about like favorite books for the year. Do you? I can start with one of my favorite books for the year. So
I would love that.
Pressure is off a little bit. So This Poison Heart is one of my favorite books of the year. The Bridget Kimmerer book. I have to. It's hard to make these lists because you almost have to like, okay, my favorite YA, my favorite sci-fi, my favorite, in these different genres. But This Poison Heart is one of the ones that like keeps coming back to me, and it's a Black queer retelling or mashup of like Little Shop of Horrors and The Secret Garden. I don't know, like you can't. There's nothing else to say. Like I could give you more details, but basically you know what you need to know to like do that. And yeah, and I absolutely loved it. And it is actually the first in the series. But here's the deal. I didn't know that when I read it. I didn't know there was going to be another one when I read it. And I didn't actually find out there was going to be another one for months. But she had signed the deal, I guess. But they didn't really bill it as book one. They just sort of like put this one out. And then she's like, oh yeah, there's going to be another one. So this July, the second one, I think it's June or July, the second one is coming out. So you should read it now. All right. What's one of your favorites?
So I made a list because we're working on being able to share. We're working on making our best of list for the year. So I thought I struggled. I originally actually challenged our team to come up with 5, and then I tried to come up with 5, and I could not narrow it.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. You had too many. You had to narrow it down. Yeah,
I did. And I was like, well, like 5 to 10 then, because I could not pick a favorite. So I think, okay, I think probably Elizabeth and Leanna would have some commentary if I didn't mention that probably if I had to pick one favorite book of the year, it would be any of the Emily Henrys that I read, because I read each of them multiple times. I should also probably follow what did I read most often. So I read Beach Read for the first time last year, and it revolutionized my relationship with romance as a genre. Even though I don't think that Beach Read it kind of straddles the genre just between romance and literary as genres go, but there's so much interesting meta commentary on romance as a genre. I was like, okay, Emily Henry, I see you. And now I aspire to, one, I've undone a lot of my own thinking that was informed by like misogynistic views that I wasn't even aware of just from having grown up in the world we live in. So I've had to so Emily taught me to undo a lot of that. And then now I aspire to be someone who thinks of romance as a genre in a way that would make Emily Henry proud. So read Beach Read for the first time last year, changed my life genuinely, which sounds dramatic, but it's true. And then people we meet on vacation, I was able to get it. I got Leanna got me an ARC. And so I read an ARC of it right before it came out and then have read it 4 times this year alone.
I love that. There are so few books that I've read multiple times.
It's a comfort book for me at this point. Like having a bad day, pick up an Emily Henry.
Sometimes I will listen to the audio after I've read the book, or vice versa. So I get like 2 reads in that way, and a lot of times it will be a different experience. If I read a physical book and then I hear something really good about the audio, I'll just throw it on my list and listen to that too.
The narrator who works with Emily Henry books too is incredible.
Like, so they might be good ones to listen to if we want.
Oh, they are. They're in for sure. And so her new book comes out next May. It's called Booksellers, and I have read it twice already too. But I felt like I didn't put it on my like official list. It's not even out yet, so I should wait. So I'll put it on my best stuff for next year.
Yeah.
But and Emily Henry also writes, Brenda, you might really enjoy her YA. She writes originally, before she wrote romance, she has 3 YA novels that are a lot about family, usually have an element of magical realism. She's just a bang up writer. She's super good. And I find her character development is especially what's great. And I really enjoy character driven stories particularly. But I like magical realism, which helps me suspend my disbelief a little bit more than something contemporary.
Yeah.
So we have a handful. I have confession. Anytime a used one has come through, I have snapped it up. So
I was about to say, like, I haven't.
You can borrow mine.
Those YAs. I haven't seen those. So yeah, I'll have to borrow one of yours or grab one. Next time one comes in, you'll have to grab it for me.
Okay, I will be the bigger person than my old self. I will be bigger than my old self, and I will do that.
Well, I'll share. Doubles, maybe that'll be double. You already have one at home, so you can leave it. I will take a moment to say, since we talked about audiobooks, if you want to get an audiobook, you can go to Libro FM. So Libro FM, and I am putting that little link there so you can keep track of that. They do digital audiobooks similar to other companies, but they partner with independent bookstores. So we get a percentage of that sale, just like if you came in and bought a physical book, we get a percentage of that. We get a percentage if you purchase an audiobook through Libro FM. And whether that's a la carte, just one book, or you sign up for a membership, it works both ways for us. So, okay. So what's a favorite romance? Because that's a big genre for you. So what's a favorite romance maybe ever, or that you read this year? Whatever it takes to narrow that down for you. I'm going to let you think, because I have one. So, and I'm not a huge romance reader, but I do have a few that have really stuck with me. So I'm going to grab one and go first. So Float Plan. Float Plan is so much fun. So Float Plan, Trish Dollar. The setup is generally that the woman and her fiance were going to go, they bought a sailboat and they're going to sail the Caribbean. The fiance passes and she is deciding whether she's going to go for herself or not. She does. This all happens at the very beginning, so no spoilers. And then it's her on the sailboat, mostly by herself, sailing through the Caribbean. And there's a romance later in the islands, but the story made me feel like I could buy a sailboat and take off, which clearly it could not do. But it was so, like, I loved her character. I love the very realistic way the romance is in this book, because she did just have a traumatic experience, just before the book starts. And that sense of like travel and adventure that's really in it as well. So Float Plan, that came out earlier this year.
Okay. So one of my other sort of like Emily Henry status romance authors is Talia Hibbert. And we keep her pretty well stocked. So I think we probably have a couple down there with you, Raina. I adore the Brown Sisters series. I can't pick a favorite of the Brown Sisters. It is. Oh yeah, we do have all three. So each of these stories, they're standalone, technically, but they were published in the order of oldest to youngest sister. Um, the Brown sisters are Black women, each of whom, this is what I love most about the way that Talia Hibbert writes. Again, character driven, which is kind of my thing. Her characters are so whole and real, that I feel like they have lives outside of this snippet that we're seeing. Like I get to know them through the 300 pages I'm with them in their book. But they're written in such a vivid way that they're out there living their lives without me. Like they're not here for me. I'm here to just kind of peek into their life for a while. And I appreciate that she writes complex and interesting and whole characters who then live a life. And you talking about romance being realistic or like feeling realistic really resonates with me too, because what I love in romance, because it's not always the case, and it shouldn't always be the case. A good, like, very far out there aspirational romance I think is very fun and awesome too. But what I really enjoy is romance that inspires me, to be a better partner, to be a better friend. And I find that Talia Hibbert does that. One of my biggest motivators for reading romance is that I think that generally, like as a life practice, profound sadness should not be more important to the human experience than profound joy. And I think that there is something about romance in particular celebrates that profound joy, and Talia Hibbert does that incredibly well. In a way that doesn't make me feel like it's out of reach, though. It makes me feel like this is the kind of love that I can cultivate in my own life. And that if I look for it, this is the kind of things that I can experience too.
Oh
So
my
cannot
gosh,
recommend.
Jody. Oh my gosh. That's like the
So
best description of like a romance. It works for movies and stuff too, like a romance book and the purpose behind it I've ever heard. I love that.
well, and I am okay. Oh, right now, thank you. I am fully to. I'm so again, Emily Henry. I owe Emily Henry for this because I had a lot of dismissive views of romance as a genre, literally before a year and a half ago. So all Talia Hibbert, who does just a bang up job.
Awesome. Okay, so we have
We
a
have,
couple. I know. So
yeah.
Mariah says any who writes her father-in-law who loves a good mystery and a mother-in-law that loves World War II character stories. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and The Rose Code. I think both of those are going to be up there with you. No pressure. No pressure.
I feel like I'm trying to navigate out of my little hole.
Yeah.
My
So
hole.
I wonder if so Helen, oh, I'm gonna mispronounce her last name. So she wrote the an elderly woman is up to no good, an elderly lady is up to no good. She has a bunch of other mysteries that are so those are really cute and they're short stories. The main character is like a 90-year-old woman. Father-in-law should read those and not care, but he might. So she has some other books though that she's Swedish, if I remember correctly. So those are translated from Swedish. And those might be up his alley. There's definitely good mysteries. The short stories are really good too, but in case that 90-year-old woman is not a thing he's into. I don't know how old your father-in-law is. Okay. So,
we also, one of the things, kind of my go-to father-in-law books we have some jokes around the shop, like dad books or mom books or mother-in-law. Like there's
you
a
have
genre.
to. It's hard to stay away from it as much as you try not to and just be like, everyone should read everything. Sometimes father-in-laws are set in their ways, so it happens.
I think it's a helpful way to sometimes categorize. So there are, I think, a handful of our staples, and we have so many of these secondhand, which is great. Especially, I love to give people a stack of books, so it's super helpful when you can get them secondhand. James Patterson, super standard, I think, sort of father-in-law book. So we've got our James Patterson's How Do Angles Work there. I also Dean Koontz. Dean Koontz is, I think, another really next to one of the things. Nope, different spider. Anyway, different girl in the thing. Dean Koontz is another really, really good one.
If he likes detective stories at all, we have a local author, Bill Lofelm, which is up there with you actually. He has I think it's 5 books, maybe 6, in a detective series that are all set here in New Orleans. The first one, the detective moves here, and then the rest of them are all set here, and those are really good mysteries as well. Yes, exactly.
One of ours. Yeah, we have a handful, quite a few.
Okay, World War II character stories. World War II character stories.
I want to say I've already sent that particular mother-in-law too. So we scoured the shelves once. And then I'm gonna work on sci-fi fantasy while we're thinking about that.
Yes, do that. Okay, so I'm gonna walk over here and look at World War II stories because there's a. I might Google it. Google is our friend. Oh, do we have Clive Cussler? Corvette is asking if we have Clive Cussler, which I think would he be up there with you?
I can check.
I feel like he would be up there with you. But I know we don't have very many Clive Cusslers. We can order pretty much everything that's in print, but we usually don't have a lot of his. I'm trying to think of Lily. Was it the Lily? Lilac Girls. The Lilac Girls. I really liked Lilac Girls.
That's a great one.
That's World War II. The Orphan Train is World War II. And there are these nonfiction books that I've read recently that are like the Radium Girls, which we had just the other day up there. It's nonfiction. It was over by Memoirs.
I sold it yesterday.
Okay. All right. So I don't know if she would read nonfiction, but there are a few books that have come out recently in the last few years. Code Girls is one, Radium Girls is another, that follow the women during World War II and some of these jobs that we don't even think of, that you don't know women had these jobs basically, but they were forced to take over these positions during World War II, and they are fascinating. If she would be willing to read nonfiction, and she really likes the character studies, because both of those that I mentioned really do go into the individual women. It's like overall the job, but then the individual women and what they did and where they came from and how they got into that position. So that might be something she'd be into as well.
Oh, that sounds super interesting.
Okay, next from Mariah, Fantasy Rex with amazing world building. Is that what you got?
All right. I grabbed two of my favorites. So first, I'm going to talk about Brandon Sanderson. Pretty standard, but I find especially depending on when you got into sci-fi fantasy, there are a lot of folks who haven't read him. So I always like to point him out. So Mistborn, I think, is one of the best ones to start with. The Mistborn series has sort of there's 3 different trilogies, but you could pick them up and set them. You don't have to read all in a row. You could read 3 and then take a break. So what I really love about Brandon Sanderson is that his plotting and his world building is nearly unparalleled in my experience. He is such a clean plotter, and everything is so things that you've forgotten about that he set up 3 books ago, he pays off. He does not set up anything that he does not pay off, and he writes a lot of female protagonists, which I enjoy. And one of the best things about Brandon Sanderson is that he finishes the series. He is a prolific writer, and he actually writes about he's published how his daily schedule and the amount of time that he spends writing and how he's able to pull this off. He is not only writing his series, he's finishing other series for people. He finished the Wheel of Time series and wrote a trilogy for that to finish it off. So Brandon Sanderson cannot recommend enough, and Mistborn is a great place to start. So Mistborn, another one of my favorites, and I love to plug this one because this one's close to my heart. So A Queen in Hiding is part of a book series called the Nine Realms series. It's a quartet. There are 4. The author, Sarah Kozloff, published them in consecutive months of 2020. So January, February, March, and April. She wrote for 7 years, and then she published all 4 of them at the same time. You might remember what was happening in the world in March of 2020, which put a damper on her entire book tour. And so I think that these books did not get the love and the attention that they deserved at the time, just because of the way that things happened in the world. So the way that I like to describe this one, and this is one, these are finished, so you can read all four. They were intended to be perfectly bingeable. That's the way they were described. So you can just get back to back, which is in fact what I did. I started reading these in February of last year. In a month where I think I only read one book, I read this one. So these are fantasy in the most classic sense. They're often compared to Game of Thrones, multiple point of views, very intricate world, lots of world building, lots of characterization. There's a lot going on. There's political intrigue. There's at one point, like, I cared about like war strategy, which is not a thing that I actually care about even a little, but I cared about it in this book. So A Queen in Hiding, I cannot recommend enough. My favorite little tidbit is one, I had to look up what catamounts were because that's the opening line. I was like, what's that? It's like a mountain lion, it turns out, but it's a better name for it. And they prowl in the throne room. They're like attached to the queen that's in hiding here. And two, the queens of this particular line of queens all have cerulean hair. And I think that is also a delightful tidbit. So if you want to read about blue-haired queens who are flanked by huge catamounts, intricate world building, A Queen in Hiding. Definitely recommend.
That sounds great. And now I have books to add to my list as well. So there's a next question after that is any fantasy or sci-fi recs with great banter. Now I want to combine these a little bit. Have you read any of the Discworld novels, Jody?
I have not personally. No.
Okay. So each individual book, great banter. They're funny. They're humorous fantasy, but it doesn't rely so much on the humor that you're like, why? This is just joke after joke after joke. So sometimes you'll get that. It's like, it's more fantasy than humor, but that funny line keeps you going through the books. So individually, great banter. That definitely is going to fall in that category. But there are like 40 of these books. So over the course, if you read more than 2 or 3 of these, you start that world they're all in the same world. They are all in the disc world. So together they are this amazing world. I mean, he wrote for decades in the same world, and there are maps. Like you can go online or whatever, you can find maps, and you can find
I love a map.
Family
Give me a
trees.
book with a map.
Exactly. Like it just goes on and on and on. So the world itself becomes amazing, like very intricately built world. But if you just read one, it's going to be fun. You're going to get enough of the world to understand this story. And anytime there's dialogue, it's like, it's fun. It's funny. It moves you right along. So there's one series, covers both. I see you looking at the shelves.
Oh, yeah, I'm browsing to see if anything else inspires me. I happen to know Corvette though, and I've already recommended most of what I would to her. So we talk books exclusively.
That's a good question too, because I haven't heard it put that way. Usually people will ask for like good characters or good world building. That's when you hear, but good banter, it's not when you hear.
Well, I think banter too is easier to find in contemporary romance. Like that's something that's banter is pretty inherent to romance as a genre. So I think to find it in fantasy is a little bit tougher. That's a narrower group. But, and I will say, and Corvette, you'll have to let me know what you think. I think that A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I know you've read, fits the bill. In that I think that it takes a more traditional, there's a lot of snark between like not only love interest, but just between all of the characters. So you'll have to let me know if you think that one fits the bill there.
Well, let's see. So we're getting near the end of our hour. Is there a question that you have or something you want to definitely make sure we talk about or recommend to people, Jordan?
Okay, I am sure. I will take that opportunity. I am just a broken record with the Every Heart a Doorway series. At the moment, there are 6 books out. We obsessively stock them. In fact, we have 4 of Every Heart of Doorways, and I'd be happy to sell every single one of them tomorrow. The Every Heart of Dory series is a set of novellas. They're super quick. They're super easy to read. They are incredibly diverse in ways that we don't often see. Not only in they're diverse in character, they're diverse in worlds. The premise of them is that children slip through the cracks of our world all the time, and we know those stories. But what happens when they come back? And so, according to this book series, they might go to a school. That school is Eleanor West School for Wayward Children. And so there is all of these interesting characters who've all found doorways into worlds that they needed. That sets the series up to be incredibly interesting and diverse across each of the books. So every other book is set at the school, and then the opposite, every other book is set in one of the worlds that they've gone through. So there's a goblin market, there is a hooved world that's full of animals who have hooves. They're magical and ones we're familiar with. There are it is characters that I have fallen in love with, that I want to know, that I've spent so much time with and want to spend more time with. And they're quick and easy to read too. So there definitely could be kind of a Sunday afternoon read. The amount I've described them as BBC television, which is a bit of I have to kind of get to why that matters. BBC is very good at doing TV that makes you want a little more. They never give you too much. They stop right before they know the end of show, I think, which American TV struggles with a little bit. That is these books. You never get enough. You always want more. Cannot speak highly enough of them. They're so good.
Okay.
Raina, I think you're in the same. What is
your
read?
First of all, I did not know that about those books. I haven't read any. I know. It's
so good.
It's so interesting. Is working at different bookstores. There's a type of books that different people read, and that when I started working here, you guys read. There's a lot of crossover in the Venn diagram, but then also there's all these other books that I knew existed, but didn't really know what they were about, so much. And you guys have shared so much of that with me, and that Sean Maguire, I'm gonna read. Okay.
So good.
So another one of my favorite books that I read this year didn't come out this year. I mean, it came out in 1925, but I read it for the first time this year, and that's Passing. So we have a few of these little adorable little ones with the gold leaf on it. And one of the reasons I'm definitely going to recommend this, and it was one of my favorite ones, is it has really stuck with me, but it feels like it could have been written this year. It's about a woman who was two friends who are Black, and one decides, or the situation comes about where she can put herself in a position to pass as white. And so that's the setup. And then they get back together as adults at some point, and what happens from there. And it is, like I said, it could have been written. When I found out it was written in 1925, I was like, oh my gosh, this had to be incredibly groundbreaking at that time. But reading it this year, you could have told me it was published in 2021, and I'd be like, oh, I totally believe you.
That's incredible.
So it's one everybody should read because it's great, but also it's got this historical significance to it that and it's short and it's incredibly readable, so there's no reason not to. You should totally read this book.
I recently, that reminds me of, I recently did a bit of a deep dive on a Jane Austen and her significance, because her birthday was earlier this month, and there was commentary from Fran Lebowitz about Jane Austen, where she says that the reason why she has such staying power is because she writes about the human condition with an incredibly sharp eye. And that's what I think Passing reminds me of as well, that it's so universal that it will, for better, for worse, and often for worse, continue to be incredibly relevant for probably another 100 years.
That is, so I've only finished. Here's a confession, Jody. I have only finished one Jane Austen book, and it was Lady Susan. Okay. It's very short, so I count it though. I totally count it.
Interesting one to pick as your one.
I picked it because actually a friend of mine recommended it to me, because I said, well, I've tried to read Jane Austen mostly in school and I never got into her. And he's like, wait, well, read this, right? It's short. It gets most of what, she's about in it. So, you can re-expose yourself to Jane Austen. I really, really liked it. But here's my question to you, a super Jane Austen fan. Which one should I read next? Because I'm scared I'm going to try another, like Pride and Prejudice, like you're forced to read it in school. I'm going to try it again. And I'm going to be like, no, still out. Like, I don't want that to happen. So what is your next, where should you start? If you're reluctant, Jane
Okay.
Austen, like you are
So
interested, but
I think it is widely considered. So Pride and Prejudice is a lot of people's favorite. It's probably my favorite if I have to pick between Pride and Prejudice and Emma are my two. But a lot of that comes from nostalgia and like the point in time in which I read it for the first time. And there's a lot kind of tied into why that's my favorite. Elizabeth Bennet is one of the best heroines ever written. And she's, of course, Pride and Prejudice. However, it is widely in the Jane communities, it is considered that neither of those are actually her best work. Most folks think that Persuasion is her strongest book in the most classic of senses. So I think if you're not a huge Austen fan, but you want to get in, you want to give it a real go, that I think the best bet is probably Persuasion. So that would be my
right?
recommendation. I know we always have Jane.
Oh
So
yeah,
I know
yeah.
we've got that one on the shelf for you if you want it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's a good one. And I appreciate that. So that would work for anybody out there too who feels the same way. Like maybe they had to read it in school and said they didn't like it, but like it's been 20 years. Maybe give it a go. See
No,
what
yeah, the first time I had to read Pride and Prejudice, it was for school, and I did not enjoy it. So, I mean, don't tell me what to do is the real problem here.
Yeah, I mean essentially and when I was in school, I would give a try to everything I was assigned. And if I wasn't in the first 20, 25 pages, I was like, I'm gonna waste my time doing this. Psh, no, especially since I was always a big reader. So like I'm reading my other stuff, the things I want to read, and all of a sudden now I have to give that up to read this thing that I don't like. I'm gonna spark notes that. Like,
Oh, for
I'm
sure.
not-
Well, and a lot of the significance and the genius of Austen really comes from understanding the context in which she was writing. It's so subtle and there's so much that was inherently subversive that if you're not aware of those things, it makes it difficult to really appreciate all of what's going on, even if you can appreciate the story on surface level. So her genius, I think, really the picture. And of course, that can be maybe not something you want to do when you're 16. So that's right.
right. Yeah, and those types of things are difficult to understand. I was forced to read Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway in like 10th grade. Did not understand why everyone likes Hemingway because I'm not a 65-year-old man. Like I really am looking forward to rereading Old Man and the Sea in 25 years. Like I
Yeah.
feel like I'm gonna have like I didn't get it and I didn't understand it. But like how could you if you're at least not an old you're not old enough, you're not in that position part of your life, that
Nor are
section of your
you,
life where you
you're
can
not
look
on the
back.
sea.
Well, yeah, I mean the sea,
Neither.
you know,
I mean, you're neither old or on the sea. Maybe you need one or the other.
when I retire, I'm gonna take a cruise with Old Man and the Sea. There we go. That's gonna do it.
Love that. I like
It's
that
a
you're
plan.
planning 25 years out. That's
Yes.
great. I have one book I plan to read later in life, and it is Catcher in the Rye for similar reasons, because I have a whole theory about Catcher in the Rye and like when you will enjoy it. And so I need to be a little older
Yeah.
for my reread.
Right. Exactly. Well, guys, I think we made it. We made it to the end of our hour. So I want to thank you, Jody, for joining me and doing all these book recs with me. And it was super great to talk to you and get actual book recommendations for myself to read. And everyone who commented, everyone who watched, we appreciate you too, even though you didn't comment. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in and being a part of this. And happy holidays to everybody out there from all of us. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.